That family dinner started like any other, until my little sister dropped the bomb. "I'm getting married the exact same day as you are, Adrienne." Cassidy said it with a sweet smile. Fork paused halfway to her mouth, eyes sparkling like she'd just announced she won the lottery. The table went dead quiet for half a second. Then Mom actually clapped. Dad let out a proud chuckle. "Isn't that perfect?" Mom gushed. "One big family celebration." Cassidy tilted her head. "You don't mind, do you? I mean, yours was going to be small anyway." I felt every pair of eyes land on me. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and answered exactly the way they expected. "I understand." Mom beamed. Dad nodded like I'd just agreed to wash the dishes for the rest of my life. Cassidy's smile widened into something sharp and victorious. "Perfect," Mom said, raising her wine. "Everyone will be at Cassidy's wedding then." I set the glass down without a sound. They thought my silence meant surrender. They had no idea it meant the countdown had already started. If you've ever had a sibling who always got the spotlight while you were told to dim yours, drop same in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say they showed up expecting a wedding and left learning what happens when you push the quiet sister too far. That wasn't the first time they chose her without even noticing. I was 9 when my own birthday cake arrived, with 2 names written in pink icing: Adrienne and Cassidy. Mom lit 15 candles, handed the lighter to my little sister, and said, "Go ahead, honey. You're the birthday girl too." Cassidy blew them all out in one breath. I stood there holding the gift I'd wrapped for myself, smiling like it didn't sting. Dad ruffled her hair. "That's our star." I learned early that clapping for someone else's moment was the fastest way to stay in the room. By 12, I'd won a full scholarship to a private high school 30 miles away. I ran home waving the letter, heart pounding. Mom glanced at it, frowned, and slid it across the table to Dad. "We can't tell Cassidy," she whispered. "She's already upset about her grades. We don't want her feeling less." Dad folded the letter once and slipped it into his desk drawer. I never brought home another report card. Then came the summer Cassidy turned 19. Our Aunt Colleen, the one who actually built Harper & Sons furniture from nothing, had started a charity foundation inside the company to help employees' kids with college tuition. Colleen put Cassidy in charge of the fundraising gala because it would look good on her resume. I was home from community college for the weekend helping with inventory in the warehouse when I noticed a transfer that didn't match. $180,000 moved from the foundation account to an LLC registered to Cassidy's best friend. The signature on the approval form was hers, looping C hard over the I exactly like she signed everything. I printed the page, stared at it for an hour, then locked it in the bottom drawer of my childhood desk. I was 21, still paying my own tuition, and I knew 3 things for certain. 1, the evidence wasn't complete yet. 2, Colleen trusted the wrong people. 3, if I spoke up, then they would bury me and protect her. So I said nothing. I went back to my night classes, kept my mouth shut, and started studying accounting instead of design. Every month, I watched another transfer disappear. Every month, I added another file to the hidden folder on my laptop. Every month, I reminded myself that patience isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just ammunition with a longer shelf life. 2 years later, when the junior internal auditor position opened at Harper & Sons, I applied the same day. Mom laughed when she saw the application on the kitchen counter. "You want to count beans for a living?" I just shrugged. Dad signed the recommendation letter without reading it. They never asked why their quiet daughter suddenly wanted to work inside the company they always said belonged to Cassidy someday. I walked into that office on the first Monday of September with a brand new badge and 5 years of secrets already burning a hole in my pocket. 5 years later, I sat in the office they never thought I'd reach. The sign on the door read, "Senior Internal Auditor Adrienne Harper." I had earned every letter of it. While Cassidy partied through college on the company's dime, I worked 70-hour weeks, caught 3 separate embezzlement schemes by junior managers, and quietly saved the board millions in tax penalties. The old men in the mahogany boardroom started asking for my reports by name. Dad still called me the quiet one, but the CFO started calling me indispensable. Roland Hayes, our biggest outside partner and the man who controlled 38% of the voting shares, took notice first. He was 62, sharp as a blade, and didn't suffer fools. After I handed him a 40-page memo that stopped a fraudulent vendor scam cold, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You see things other people miss, Miss Harper. I like that." From then on, every quarterly review ended with him asking my opinion before anyone else's. Dad sat in those same meetings, smiling tightly whenever Roland praised me. That's how I met Quentin. He walked into the finance wing one January morning carrying blueprints for a new distribution center. Tall, dark hair sleeves rolled up, the kind of calm that doesn't need to prove anything. He stopped at my desk, looked at the spreadsheets covering every inch of it, and asked, "Mind if I borrow a corner?" "The conference room is booked." I slid a stack aside. He sat. We talked numbers for 2 hours straight. By the end of the week, we were having lunch in the cafeteria. By the end of the month, we were having dinner somewhere the family would never look. Quentin never asked why I kept our relationship off my parents' radar. He just accepted that Sunday dinners were off limits, and that I flinched whenever Cassidy's name came up in the news for another charity gala she hadn't actually funded. 4 months ago, on a quiet Tuesday, we drove to the Kent County Clerk's office, signed the papers, and became legally married with 2 courthouse strangers as witnesses. No rings yet, no announcements. Just a certificate locked in my safe, and the quiet knowledge that my name was already Adrienne Hayes on every legal document that mattered. Meanwhile, the hidden folder on my encrypted drive grew thicker. Over 5 years, I documented every transfer, every fake invoice, every wire that left the foundation account and landed in companies tied to Cassidy or her friends. $1,800,000, give or take. Enough for federal prison time, enough to destroy the golden child forever. I kept waiting for the right moment, the moment when speaking up would end it instead of just making me the problem. Then, on a regular Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Colleen collapsed at the lake house. Stage 4, pancreatic. Weeks, maybe less. She's asking for you." I stared at the screen until the words stopped swimming. Colleen had always been the only adult who looked at me like I was more than background noise. She was also the one person whose signature sat next to Cassidy's on every fraudulent withdrawal. If she died without knowing the truth, the money would still flow to the wrong people. If she learned the truth too late, the family would spin it into poor. Cassidy was misled. I closed the folder on my laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove the 47 miles to her lake house outside Grand Rapids without telling anyone where I was going. One rainy Thursday, the phone rang, Cassidy's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hey, sis." Her voice was sugar poured over glass. "Guess what Holden and I just locked in the perfect date. Same Saturday you picked. Crazy, right?" I watched rain streak down my office window. "Same venue too," she added, laughing lightly. "The Riverside complex has 2 halls. We'll take the big one. Yours can be the cozy little backup." Mom grabbed the extension. "Adrienne, honey, it makes total sense. Cassidy's guest list is huge. Yours is, well, smaller. You understand, don't you?" Dad's voice chimed in from the background. "Be the bigger person. Family first." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Of course," I said, calm and clear. "Whatever works best for Cassidy." They exhaled in unison, thanked me, told me how mature I was, and hung up glowing with victory. That evening, I left work early, drove straight to Spectrum Health Butterworth Hospital, and took the elevator to the oncology floor. Colleen lay propped against white pillows, thinner than the last time I'd seen her, but her eyes were still sharp. She waved away the nurse and pointed to the chair beside the bed. I pulled the encrypted drive from my pocket and plugged it into the tablet the hospital provided. One by one, I opened the files, bank records, forged signatures, shell companies, every dollar traced. Colleen's breathing grew shallow as the numbers climbed. When the final total hit the screen, she closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "How long have you known since the first transfer? And you waited." I waited until it couldn't be explained away. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold but steady. "I'm changing everything," she whispered. "Everything." I told her about the phone call that afternoon. She actually smiled, the first real smile I'd seen on her in months. "Then let's give them the day they're expecting," she said. "Only it won't be a wedding they remember." Her attorney, Margaret Klein, arrived within the hour. Colleen had already called ahead. Margaret spread fresh documents across the rolling tray, a new revocable trust, a codicil cutting Dustin, Dawn, and Cassidy out completely, and a power of attorney appointment naming me sole executor upon Colleen's death. 11 million in liquid assets plus her 42% controlling stake in Harper & Sons Furniture would transfer to the new trust the moment Colleen signed. I would be the only beneficiary. Cassidy's name appeared nowhere. Colleen took the pen with shaking fingers. Margaret explained every page in plain language. When it came to the clause disinheriting her brother's family, Colleen paused. "They'll hate me," she said. "They hated the version of you that let them steal," I answered. She nodded once and signed. Margaret witnessed, notarized, and slid the originals into a sealed envelope. "These become effective immediately," she told us. "I'll file copies with the probate court tomorrow." Colleen handed me a second document, a signed letter authorizing Margaret to host an estate announcement and trust disclosure at the Riverside complex on the exact date Cassidy had booked for her reception. Hall A, 4 o'clock the afternoon of the so-called wedding. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. Colleen leaned back against the pillows, exhausted but clear-eyed. "Make sure they're all there," she said. "They will be," I promised. She closed her eyes. "Good," she whispered. "Let them walk in thinking they've won." Margaret gathered her briefcase. I stayed until the nurse returned with the next round of medication. Before I left, Colleen squeezed my hand one last time. "Thank you for waiting until it mattered," she said. I kissed her forehead and walked out into the rain. From that night on, every move had to look like wedding planning. Quentin and I met the Riverside complex manager the very next morning. Cassidy had already booked Hall B for her 400-guest reception. We smiled sweetly and reserved Hall A for the exact same hours. The manager raised an eyebrow when we requested a simple projector-long conference tables and 200 chairs in rows instead of rounds. "It's a modern minimalist vibe," Quentin said smoothly. She shrugged and took the deposit. Back home, we designed the invitations on heavy cream cardstock with subtle gold foil. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Adrienne Harper and Quentin Hayes, Saturday, 4 o'clock, Riverside Complex Hall. A formal attire requested, no gifts please. Your presence is our joy." We never mentioned the civil ceremony already on file at the county clerk. The printer delivered 500 cards. Quentin addressed the ones to Roland's partners, the board members, the outside auditors, and every major vendor we trusted. I handled the short family list: Mom, Dad, Cassidy, and Holden, a handful of cousins who still spoke to me. They opened theirs and immediately texted congratulations, assuming I was finally doing something big. Cassidy sent a string of heart emojis and a voice note. "So glad you upgraded, sis. See you there." I played it for Quentin, and we both laughed for the first time in days. While the invitations went out, Margaret worked quietly from Colleen's hospital room. New accounts were opened in the name of the Colleen R. Harper Revocable Trust. Brokerage holdings, real estate deeds, and every share certificate moved over within 72 hours. Colleen signed each transfer sheet between morphine doses, her handwriting shaky but legally binding. By the time the last stock certificate was re-registered, Cassidy's name no longer appeared anywhere that mattered. The trust named me sole successor trustee and beneficiary. $11 million and controlling interest in the company now sat behind a wall only I could open. We kept visiting Colleen every evening. She grew weaker, but her mind stayed razor-sharp. She reviewed the seating chart Margaret prepared. Roland front row center the board, to his left auditors and attorneys, filling the first 5 rows, family tucked in the back corner where they couldn't make a scene. She approved the final run of show doors open at 3:30, video tribute at 4 sharp, Margaret reading the trust terms aloud, evidence presentation Q&A only from pre-approved shareholders. Colleen even picked the music, a single piano track she loved, no wedding march. Quentin handled the practical details. He ordered the projector screen, arranged private security in plain clothes, and confirmed the live notary would be on site. I chose the flowers, simple white hydrangeas along the front table only, because they looked bridal enough from a distance. Mom called twice asking about my dress. I told her it was ivory lace and left it at that. She offered to help set up. I said the venue handled everything. She sounded relieved. The day the last invitation slid into the last envelope, Quentin sealed it with a gold wax stamp we'd had made just for the occasion. He dropped the entire stack into the blue mailbox outside the post office on Wealthy Street. The metal lid clanged shut. We stood there in the cold, watching the box swallow 500 futures. Quentin slipped his hand into mine. 7 days, he said. I squeezed back. 7 days. 7 days to go, and the venue started filling with the wrong kind of flowers. I walked into Hall A on Monday morning carrying nothing but a clipboard and a measuring tape. The delivery crew had already placed long, dark walnut tables in perfect rows facing the stage. No round guest tables, no sweetheart table, no dance floor marked in tape. Just 200 charcoal gray chairs lined up like a courtroom. A 75-inch screen hung center stage, cables snaked to a locked AV cabinet. White hydrangeas sat in low steel vases along the front table, only exactly enough to fool anyone glancing through the glass doors from the hallway. The manager handed me the final invoice. Still no bar, no DJ booth, no photo backdrop, she asked. I smiled. We're keeping it intimate. She shrugged and walked away. Margaret confirmed the schedule by text, notary on site. At 3:15, Roland plus 12 board members confirmed, federal forensic accountant arriving with sealed evidence binders. Plainclothes security at every door, I replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. Cassidy blew up my phone all week. Tuesday, a selfie in her fitting room veil trailing to the floor, caption, "Can't wait for you to see this in person." Wednesday, a video of Holden's parents' guest list, 2 state senators, 3 local news anchors, the owner of the Grand Rapids Griffins. Thursday, a photo of crystal champagne flutes engraved with C and H. I answered every message with the same 3 words. Looks gorgeous, or so exciting. She never noticed the replies got shorter. Colleen slipped further each day. I visited after work, bringing the final addendum pages Margaret needed. She signed them propped up in bed, oxygen, hissing softly, pen scratching across paper like dry leaves. The last document transferred the lake house deed into the trust the moment her heart stopped. She pushed the pages toward me with trembling fingers. Done, she rasped. I folded them carefully, slid them into the courier envelope, and kissed her forehead. She managed half a smile. Give them hell, kid. Friday, I returned to the venue alone. The screen now displayed a simple holding slide, Harper family celebration, in elegant gold script. The AV tech tested the projector. The forensic accountant's slides loaded perfectly, timestamps, signatures, dollar amounts in bold red circles. Security walked the corridor linking Hall A and Hall B, confirming the double doors could be locked from the inside in under 4 seconds. Everything was in place. Saturday morning, Cassidy sent one final text, a mirror selfie in her full gown, cathedral train, pooling around her feet. See you at 4, big sis, Can't wait to share the day. I stared at the photo for a long moment, then typed, "See you there." I turned the phone face down and left it on the kitchen counter. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside one last time. Hall A stood empty, quiet lights dimmed to a soft gold. The hydrangeas caught the glow and looked almost bridal. I walked the center aisle heels, clicking on the hardwood, and stopped at the front table where Margaret would stand in less than 24 hours. I set my palm on the cool wood and felt the hum of the projector fans behind the screen. Every seat faced this spot. Every camera in the room would point here tomorrow. I looked up at the blank screen, then at the rows of chairs waiting to be filled by people who thought they were coming to a wedding. The overhead lights flickered once as the building switched to evening power. I stood alone in the golden glow, listening to the silence that would soon be broken forever. Saturday morning, the parking lot was already chaos. Valets in white shirts directed luxury SUVs toward Hall B, where Cassidy's wedding arched in pink neon above the entrance. White balloons bobbed against the spring sky. Photographers darted between guests in pastel suits and shimmering gowns. Mom stood near the doors in a mother-of-the-bride gown the color of champagne, greeting everyone like royalty. Dad shook hands and laughed too loud. Cassidy floated past in a cloud of tulle veil, trailing 10 feet behind her, waving like she owned the building. Hall A looked dark and silent from the outside. A single printed sign on the door read, "Private Event. Harper Family Only." Mom spotted it while posing for pictures and smirked. "Looks like someone scaled back at the last minute," she called to a cluster of cousins. They laughed and snapped selfies in front of the locked doors. At 11:30, the tone changed. Blacktown cars began pulling up to the side entrance. Roland stepped out first, navy suit, sharp silver hair perfect. Board members followed. The outside auditors, 2 senior partners from Margaret's firm. Plainclothes security guided them through a staff door none of the wedding guests noticed. By 11:50, every seat inside Hall A was filled with the most powerful people in West Michigan furniture. Quentin and I took our places in the front row beside Roland, the doors locked with a soft click. Across the corridor, Hall B was in full swing. Cassidy's ceremony had just ended. Guests spilled into the reception area, hunting champagne. Mom glanced at her watch, nudged Dad, and pointed toward Hall A. "Let's go say hi to the happy couple," she said loudly. A dozen relatives trailed behind them, giggling. They reached the double doors and pulled. Nothing happened. Dad knocked. A security officer in a black suit opened one door 6 inches. Margaret appeared behind him, calm and professional in a charcoal skirt suit. "May I help you?" Mom pushed forward. "We're family. Adrienne's family." Margaret smiled politely. "Of course. Please come in. The Harper estate disclosure is about to begin." The group filed inside, still chuckling, expecting embarrassment. The doors closed and locked again. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up with Colleen's face, filmed 2 days earlier in her hospital bed. She looked frail, but steady. "If you are watching this, I have passed," the recording began. Gasps rippled through the back rows. Cassidy, still in her wedding gown, shoved forward. "What is this?" Margaret took the microphone. "This is the formal reading of the last will and testament of Colleen Rose Harper, along with the activation of her revocable trust." The next slide appeared: bank transfers, dates, amounts, Cassidy's forged signatures blown up 20 feet wide. $1.8 million over 5 years. The room went dead silent except for the recorded click of the projector. Colleen's voice continued. "My niece Cassidy Harper abused the trust I placed in her. Every dollar is documented. The evidence has been turned over to federal authorities." Cassidy's knees buckled. 2 cousins caught her before she hit the floor. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Dad turned the color of ash. Margaret kept reading, calm and methodical. "All prior bequests to my brother Dustin, his wife Dawn, and their daughter Cassidy are revoked. The entirety of my estate, $11 million in liquid assets, and 42% controlling interest in Harper & Sons Furniture, passes immediately to the Colleen R. Harper Revocable Trust. Adrienne Harper Hayes is named sole trustee and beneficiary. The final slide showed the signed notarized trust document dated 10 days ago. Colleen's recorded voice returned one last time. I should have seen it sooner. Adrienne did. This is what justice looks like. The screen went black. Cassidy screamed a raw, broken sound. Holden backed toward the exit face, pale, already pulling out his phone. Mom lunged at me. Security intercepted her before she took 2 steps. Dad just stared at the floor. Margaret set the microphone down. This matter is now in the hands of federal authorities. 3 months later, the mailbox at our new house stayed empty. We had closed on the Cedar and Stone place in Cascade Township the week after Colleen's funeral. 6 wooded acres, no neighbors within shouting distance, a long gravel drive that made it impossible to show up uninvited. The first thing I did was forward the old landline to voicemail and cancel every family group chat. New numbers, new email addresses, new locks. No forwarding address left behind. Cassidy's indictment hit the Grand Rapids Press front page 8 days after the disclosure. Federal wire fraud, 18 counts, maximum exposure, 15 years. Her mugshot ran beside the headline, Local Heiress Accused of Stealing $1.8 million from Family Charity. Holden filed for annulment the same week. The paperwork cited fraud discovered on the wedding day. Cassidy now lived in a rented studio above a laundromat, ankle monitor blinking while she awaited trial. Mom and Dad lost the house on Reed's Lake in the foreclosure auction. They had refinanced twice using Colleen's shares as collateral, shares now worth exactly 0. The bank padlocked the doors 37 days after the trust activation. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near East Grand Rapids High School, the same complex they used to call low class when driving past. Colleen passed quietly 2 weeks after the event. I held her hand while the monitors slowed. She never asked about the others, only whispered, "You did good," and closed her eyes for the last time. The trust transferred the full $11 million and controlling shares into my name the same afternoon. Roland called it the cleanest succession I've ever seen. The company changed overnight. I took the chairman seat Colleen had warmed for 40 years. We cleaned house quietly. Certain executives who had looked the other way for years suddenly retired with generous packages and ironclad NDAs. Revenue climbed 12% in the first quarter under the new structure. Nobody dared ask why. I still drive past the old family house sometimes when I'm near the lake. The new owners painted it gray and took down the basketball hoop Cassidy used to brag about. The swing set is gone. The yard looks peaceful. Quentin and I wake the same way every morning. He starts the coffee while I open the blinds. Sunlight spills across the kitchen island, catches on the plain gold bands we finally bought. We drink from the same 2 mugs, no rush, no phone buzzing with drama. Some days we don't speak for the first hour. We don't need to. People sometimes ask if I ever feel guilty. I don't. Guilt belongs to those who believe rules don't apply to them because love will cover the bill. I simply stopped paying their tab. Silence isn't weak. Silence held long enough and aimed correctly becomes the loudest verdict a person can deliver. I waited until the evidence was undeniable, until the stage was perfect, until the audience had no choice but to see the truth. Then I let the consequences speak for me. If you've ever been told to stay small so someone else could shine brighter, remember this. The quiet ones aren't broken. We're just patient. And when our moment comes, we don't need to raise our voice. We only need to open the door and let the truth walk in.